The stars outside the window were cold and distant. Park Ji-hoon stood at the observation deck of Kepler-7, a mining station floating at the edge of known space. He held a cup of cold coffee in his hand. He had forgotten to drink it again. This happened often these days. Behind him, he heard small footsteps. His daughter Yuna walked up to him, rubbing her eyes with her tiny fists. She was only 5 years old, but she moved like someone carrying a heavy weight. Her pink pajamas had little rockets on them. Her mother had bought them for her, back when her mother was still alive. "Appa, I cannot sleep," Yuna said softly. Ji-hoon put down his coffee and lifted her into his arms. She was getting heavier. Children grow so fast, he thought. His wife Eunbi would have known what to say. She always knew the right words. But Eunbi had been gone for 2 years now, taken by a reactor accident that had also taken 3 other good people. "Bad dreams again?" Ji-hoon asked. Yuna nodded against his shoulder. She did not talk about the dreams. She never did. But Ji-hoon knew they were about her mother. He carried her back to their small quarters, a simple room with 2 beds, a tiny kitchen, and pictures on the walls. Most of the pictures showed Eunbi smiling. Ji-hoon could not bring himself to take them down. He worked as an engineer on Kepler-7. The job was hard and the hours were long. The station floated near asteroid fields rich with valuable minerals. Companies paid good money for workers willing to live so far from Earth. Ji-hoon needed that money. He wanted to save enough to send Yuna to a good school on the inner colonies, where the air was clean and children played under real sunlight. But being a single father on a mining station was not easy. The station had a child care facility, but it was small and crowded. The workers were kind but busy. Yuna spent most of her days sitting alone, drawing pictures or holding her stuffed rabbit. The rabbit was old and worn. One ear was barely hanging on. Eunbi had sewn that rabbit herself during her pregnancy. The next morning, Ji-hoon woke up to his alarm at 5. He had to be at the engineering bay by 6. He gently woke Yuna and helped her get dressed. She moved slowly, like a little ghost. She used to be such a happy child, always laughing and asking questions. Now she barely spoke. Ji-hoon dropped her off at the childcare facility. A woman named Kim Soo-jin ran the place. She was kind and patient, but she had 15 other children to watch. "She did not eat much yesterday," Soo-jin told Ji-hoon quietly. "She just sat by the window and looked at the stars." Ji-hoon felt his heart squeeze tight. "I will talk to her tonight," he said. But he knew he would come home exhausted, and Yuna would already be half asleep, and another day would pass without the conversation they needed to have. That afternoon, something unusual happened on the station. A ship arrived carrying a delegation of Valori. Ji-hoon had heard of them, but never seen one in person. The Valori were tall and slender, with skin that shifted between shades of blue and silver. They had large eyes that seemed to glow softly, and their movements were graceful like dancers. The Valori were known across the galaxy for 2 things. First, they had powerful empathic abilities. They could sense emotions the way humans could sense temperature. Second, they raised their children communally. Valori did not have individual families like humans. Instead, all adults in a community shared responsibility for all children. No child belonged to just one parent. The delegation had come to study human adaptation to deep space. They wanted to understand how humans survived in such harsh conditions, so far from their home planet. The station commander welcomed them and assigned them quarters in the East Wing. Ji-hoon did not pay much attention to the visitors. He had too much work to do. That night, he finished his shift 2 hours late because of a problem with the water recycling system. He walked through the station corridors toward the childcare facility, his body aching with tiredness. When he arrived, Soo-jin was waiting with Yuna. The little girl was already asleep, curled up on a bench with her rabbit clutched to her chest. Ji-hoon thanked Soo-jin and carefully picked up his daughter. She mumbled something in her sleep but did not wake. As he walked through the corridors, Ji-hoon passed by the observation lounge. He did not notice the figure standing in the shadows, watching him. Tira, a Valori xenobiologist, had been observing the humans on the station all day. She had seen many interesting things, but nothing had caught her attention like this tired human man carrying his sleeping child through the empty halls. Among the Valori, no adult ever looked so exhausted from caring for a child. The burden was always shared, but this human carried everything alone. Tira could feel his emotions even from a distance. Exhaustion, yes. Worry, definitely. But underneath those feelings was something else. Something fierce and bright, like a fire that refused to go out. It took her a moment to identify it. Love. Pure, intense, focused love for that one small child in his arms. Tira had studied humans in theory. She knew they formed tight family bonds. But seeing it in person was different. The intensity of it surprised her. Among her people, affection was spread thin across many connections. It was gentle and warm, like sunlight. But this human's love was like a laser beam, narrow and powerful, focused on just one target. She watched until the man disappeared around a corner. Then she returned to her quarters and began writing notes for her research. She wrote about human families, about single parents, about the strange and beautiful way humans poured all their love into just a few people. But her notes felt incomplete. Data and observations were not enough. She wanted to understand more. She wanted to know why this man kept going despite his exhaustion. She wanted to know what his daughter dreamed about. She wanted to know what happened to the child's mother. For the first time in her long career, Tira was not just curious about humans. She was curious about specific humans. Two specific humans. A tired father and his quiet daughter. She did not know it yet, but this curiosity would change her life forever. It would teach her things her people had never understood. It would show her that love was not just an emotion to be studied. It was a force that could cross the boundaries between species and cultures. Outside her window, the stars continued their ancient dance. Somewhere on the station, a little girl dreamed of her mother, and her father sat beside her bed, watching her sleep, wondering how he would find the strength to face another day. He did not know that help was coming. He did not know that an alien woman was thinking about him at that very moment. He only knew that he loved his daughter more than anything in the universe, and that love, even when it hurt, was the only thing keeping him alive. The childcare facility was loud that day. Too many children were crying at once. Kim Soo-jin ran from one corner to another, trying to calm everyone down. A pipe had burst in the play area, and water was everywhere. Workers came to fix it, making even more noise with their tools. Yuna sat in her usual spot by the window. She pressed her hands over her ears and squeezed her eyes shut. The noise was too much. The chaos was too much. She wanted to go somewhere quiet. She wanted her mother. When Soo-jin turned away to help a crying toddler, Yuna slipped off her chair. She held her stuffed rabbit tight and walked toward the door. Nobody noticed her leave. She was such a quiet child that people often forgot she was there. The corridors of Kepler-7 were confusing. Yuna had only ever walked them while holding her father's hand, but she kept moving, turning left and right, looking for somewhere peaceful. She passed engineers and miners who were too busy to notice a small girl wandering alone. Eventually, she found herself in a part of the station she had never seen before. The walls here were painted a soft blue color. The lights were dimmer and warmer. Strange symbols decorated the doors. This was the Valori Research Wing. Yuna did not know that. She only knew that it was quiet here. She found a corner near a large window that looked out at the stars. She sat down, pulled her knees to her chest, and started to cry. She cried for her mother. She cried because she was lost. She cried because her father always looked so tired, and she was afraid that one day he would disappear too, just like her mother had. The tears came fast and hot, soaking the fur of her rabbit. That was how Tira found her. The Valori woman had been walking to her laboratory when she felt something. A wave of emotion so strong it made her stop in her tracks. Pain, fear, grief, and underneath it all, a terrible loneliness. She followed the feeling down the corridor until she saw the small human child crying in the corner. Tira approached slowly. She did not want to frighten the girl. She knelt down a few steps away and waited. The child looked up with red, swollen eyes. "Hello, little one," Tira said softly. Her voice was musical, like wind chimes. "You are lost?" Yuna stared at her. She had never seen a Valori before. The woman's skin was the color of the sky just before night. Her eyes were large and kind, glowing with a soft inner light. She was strange and beautiful, and somehow not scary at all. "I want my Iyama," Yuna whispered. Tira felt the wave of grief crash over her again. She understood now. This child had lost her mother. The pain was fresh and raw, even though the loss had happened long ago. Among the Valori, such grief would be shared by dozens of adults, diluted until it became bearable. But this child carried it all alone. "May I sit with you?" Tira asked. Yuna nodded. Tira sat down beside her, folding her long legs gracefully. For a while they just sat together in silence, looking at the stars. "My people believe that when someone dies, they become part of the stars," Tira said eventually. "Every light you see out there is someone who was loved." Yuna looked at the window. "Iyama is a star now?" "Perhaps. Which one do you think she might be?" Yuna studied the stars carefully. Then she pointed at a bright one near the edge of the window. "That one. Because she always smiled so bright." Tira smiled. "That is a beautiful choice." Without thinking about it, Yuna reached out and took Tira's hand. The Valori skin was cool and smooth, like touching polished stone, but it was not cold. There was warmth underneath and something else. A feeling of calm spread through Yuna's body. Her tears stopped. Her breathing slowed. For the first time in a very long time, she felt peaceful. This was Tira's empathic gift. She could not take away grief, but she could share it. She could carry part of the burden, making it lighter for the one who suffered. Among her people, this was normal, but she had never done it for a human child before. "What is your name, little one?" Tira asked. "Yuna. What is your name?" "I am called Tira." "Tira," Yuna repeated. "That is a pretty name." They sat together for almost an hour. Tira told Yuna about her home planet, where the trees grew blue and the river sang songs. Yuna told Tira about her mother, about the rabbit she had made, about the dreams that came at night. For the first time in 2 years, Yuna talked about her grief to someone who truly listened. Then the peace was broken by running footsteps. Park Ji-hoon came around the corner, his face pale with fear. Sujin had called him at work. Yuna was missing. He had searched everywhere, his heart pounding with terror. The station was dangerous. There were so many places a child could get hurt. When he saw Yuna sitting calmly with a Valori woman, he stopped. Relief washed over him, quickly followed by confusion. His daughter was holding an alien's hand and actually smiling. "Appa!" Yuna jumped up and ran to him. He caught her in his arms and held her tight. "Yuna, you scared me. You cannot just wander off like that." His voice was shaking. "I am sorry, Appa, but I found a friend. This is Tira. She told me Yama is a star now." Ji-hoon looked at the Valori woman. She had risen gracefully and stood with her hands folded in front of her. She did not look dangerous or strange. She looked kind. "Thank you for finding her," he said. "I am sorry if she disturbed your work." "She disturbed nothing," Tira said. "Your daughter has a beautiful heart. She carries much sadness for one so young." Ji-hoon flinched. The words touched a wound he kept hidden. "We manage," he said stiffly. Tira tilted her head. She could feel his emotions clearly. Pride, defensiveness, and underneath, the same crushing grief that lived in his daughter. Father and child were mirrors of each other, both drowning in pain they refused to share. "Among my people," Tira said gently, "we have a saying, a burden shared is a burden halved. No one should grieve alone. We are not alone. We have each other. Yes, but perhaps you could have more." Before Ji-hoon could respond, Yuna tugged at his sleeve. "Appa, can Tira visit us? Please? She knows about stars and her planet has blue trees." Ji-hoon hesitated. He did not know this alien woman. He did not trust easily, especially when it came to his daughter. But Yuna was looking up at him with something he had not seen in her eyes for 2 years. Hope. "Perhaps," he said finally. "We will see." Tira bowed her head slightly. "I would like that very much. Goodbye, little Yuna. Goodbye, Yuna's father." "My name is Ji-hoon," he said. He was not sure why he told her. "Goodbye, Ji-hoon." He carried Yuna back to their quarters. She fell asleep quickly that night, without any bad dreams. When Ji-hoon checked on her, she was smiling in her sleep, one hand reaching toward the window where the stars shone bright. He stood there for a long time, thinking about blue-skinned aliens and shared burdens, and the strange feeling that maybe, just maybe, he did not have to carry everything alone. Weeks passed on Kepler 7. Tira visited Ji-hoon and Yuna often. At first it was once a week, then twice, Then almost every day, she would come to their quarters in the evening after Jihoon finished work. She would bring small gifts from the Valori wing, glowing crystals that changed color, dried flowers from her home planet that smelled like honey and rain, stories about distant worlds and ancient legends. Yuna loved these visits. She would sit on Tira's lap and listen with wide eyes as the Valori woman described the wonders of the galaxy. She learned Valori star songs, simple melodies that her mother's people sang to children at bedtime. She started eating better. She started talking more. The shadows under her eyes began to fade. Jihoon noticed all of this. He sat across the room during these visits, pretending to read reports or fix broken equipment. But he was always listening. He watched his daughter come alive again, and something warm spread through his chest. It felt like hope. It felt like gratitude. It felt like something else he was afraid to name. One evening after Yuna fell asleep, Tira stayed for tea. She and Jihoon sat in the small kitchen, speaking in quiet voices. "Tell me about your wife," Tira said. Jihoon stiffened. He did not talk about Yunbi, not to anyone. The pain was still too fresh, even after 2 years. But Tira waited patiently, her glowing eyes soft with understanding. She did not push. She did not demand. She simply created a space where words could come out if they wanted to, and slowly they did. She was a medical technician, Jihoon said. She came to Kepler 7 6 years ago. I was already here. We met in the cafeteria. She laughed at my terrible jokes. He smiled at the memory. Nobody else laughed at my jokes, but she did. She always did. He talked for an hour. He told Tira about their wedding, a small ceremony in the station garden dome. He told her about Yunbi's pregnancy, about the joy of holding newborn Yuna for the first time. He told her about the accident, the explosion in Reactor 4, the moment when his whole world fell apart. When he finished, his face was wet with tears. He had not cried in 2 years. He had not allowed himself to cry. He had to be strong for Yuna. Tira reached across the table and took his hand. The same calm that she had given Yuna now flowed into him. The grief did not disappear, but it became lighter, easier to carry. "Thank you," Jihoon whispered, "for listening." "Thank you for sharing," Tira replied. "Your love for her is beautiful. It does not need to end just because she is gone." But not everyone on the station was happy about Jihoon's new friendship. The whispers started in the cafeteria. Workers noticed that Jihoon spent his evenings with one of the Valori. They saw Tira walking through the corridors with little Yuna holding her hand. They talked behind closed doors and raised eyebrows. "It is not right," said one engineer. "His wife just died." 2 years ago," another replied. "But still, an alien. What is he thinking?" "Maybe he is lonely. Men do stupid things when they are lonely." The gossip reached Kwon Do-hyun, the station supervisor. He was a stern man with gray hair and strict ideas about proper behavior. He called Jihoon into his office on a cold Tuesday morning. "Sit down," Do-hyun said. His voice was flat and businesslike. Jihoon sat. He already knew what this was about. "I have heard some things," Do-hyun began, "about you and the Valori woman. Tira, I believe her name is." "She is a friend," Jihoon said carefully. "A friend. You spend every evening with this friend. Your daughter calls her by name. People are talking, Jihoon." "Let them talk." Do-hyun leaned forward. "I am trying to help you. You are a good engineer. You have a future with this company. But if people think you are unstable, if they think your judgment is affected by personal matters, it could hurt your career. Do you understand?" Jihoon felt anger rise in his chest. "My daughter is happy for the first time in 2 years. She sleeps without nightmares. She smiles. I will not give that up because some people like to gossip. Think about what your wife would say." The words hit Jihoon like a slap. He stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Do not speak about my wife. You did not know her." He left the office without waiting for permission. His hands were shaking. He walked through the corridors until he found a quiet corner where no one could see him. Then he punched the wall, hard enough to hurt. Yumbi would have understood. He knew that. She had the biggest heart of anyone he ever met. She would have loved Tira. She would have been grateful that someone was helping their daughter heal. But the doubt crept in anyway. Was he being selfish? Was he moving too fast? Was he replacing Yunbi's memory with someone new? Meanwhile, Tira was facing her own struggles. The Valori delegation gathered for their weekly meeting. The leader, an elder named Oren, raised concerns about Tira's behavior. "You spend too much time with the humans," Oren said. "Specifically with two humans. This is not our way." "I am studying them," Tira replied, "learning about human families." "You are becoming attached. I can feel it, Tira. Your emotions are changing. You are forming exclusive bonds. This is dangerous." Among the Valori, attachment to specific individuals was considered unhealthy. Their society worked because love and responsibility were shared equally among all. Personal attachments created jealousy, possessiveness, conflict. Their entire culture was built on avoiding these problems. "Perhaps I am learning something new," Tira said softly. "Perhaps humans have wisdom we have not considered." Oren shook his head. "Humans burn bright and fast. Their intense attachments bring intense pain. Look at that man, Ji-hoon. His love for his wife nearly destroyed him when she died. Is that what you want?" Tira thought about Ji-hoon's face when he talked about Yumbi. Yes, there was pain, terrible, crushing pain, but there was also joy, pride, beauty. He had loved deeply, and that love had created Yuna. It had created memories that would live forever. "Maybe some things are worth the pain," she said. That night, she meditated alone in her quarters. She searched her feelings carefully, the way her people had taught her. What she found surprised her. She loved Yuna, not in the diffuse, gentle way the Valori loved all children. She loved this specific child, with her stuffed rabbit and her sad eyes and her mother's bright smile. And she loved Ji-hoon, this tired, stubborn, broken man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders and still found strength to be gentle. Tira had never felt anything like this before. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was everything her people had warned her about. She did not care. For the first time in her life, Tira chose something just for herself. She chose to love two humans, not because it was expected, not because it was shared, but because her heart demanded it. Outside her window, the stars burned on. Somewhere on the station, a father sat beside his sleeping daughter, wondering about the future. And a blue-skinned woman made a decision that would change all their lives. Love had found them. Now they just had to be brave enough to accept it. The news came on a Wednesday morning. All engineers reported to the main briefing room. The station commander, a serious woman named Director Han, stood at the front with a map displayed behind her. "We have discovered something," she said. "Mining Team 4 found a large deposit of xenium ore in Sector 7. This is good news. Xenium is rare and valuable. One successful extraction could fund this station for the next decade." The engineers murmured with excitement. Xenium was worth more than gold, more than diamonds. It powered the fastest ships in the galaxy. "However," Director Han continued, and her voice grew heavy, "there is a problem. The deposit is located near a pocket of radioactive material. The extraction will be dangerous. We need volunteers who understand the risks." She explained the mission. A small team would go deep into the asteroid, set up equipment, and carefully extract the xenium without disturbing the radioactive pocket. It would take 3 days. The pay would be triple normal rates. Ji-hoon listened carefully. Triple pay. That was enough to finally afford Yuna's school on the inner colonies. That was enough to give her a real future, with green grass and blue skies and other children her age. He raised his hand. "Park Ji-hoon," Director Han read his name. "Are you sure? You have a daughter." "That is exactly why I am volunteering," he said. The mission was scheduled for 1 week later. Ji-hoon spent that week preparing. He organized his documents, wrote instructions for Yuna's care, and tried not to think about what could go wrong. Dangerous missions happened all the time in deep space. Most of them ended fine. Most of them. He did not tell Yuna the details. He only said that Appa had an important job to do and would be gone for a few days. She accepted this with the quiet understanding of a child who had already learned that adults sometimes had to go away. The night before the mission, Tira came to visit as usual. Yuna showed her a drawing she had made. It showed 3 figures holding hands. One was small with black hair. One was tall with black hair. One was tall and blue. "This is our family," Yuna said proudly. Tira looked at the drawing for a long time. Her eyes grew bright with emotion. "It is beautiful, little one. I will treasure it." Later, after Yuna fell asleep, Jihoon and Tira sat together in the quiet kitchen. The station hummed softly around them. Stars drifted past the window. "You are afraid," Tira said. It was not a question. She could feel his emotions clearly. "Yes," Jihoon admitted. "Not of dying. I have made peace with that possibility. I am afraid of leaving her alone. She would not be alone. The station would care for her. She would be sent to family on Earth." Jihoon shook his head. "I have no family on Earth. Yunbi was an orphan. Yuna has no one except me." The words hung in the air, heavy and terrible. A 5-year-old girl with no one in the universe except a father who was about to walk into danger. Tira reached across the table. She took Jihoon's hands in hers. Her skin was cool and smooth, but her grip was firm. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I have spoken with Director Han. If something happens to you, I have requested to become Yuna's guardian." Jihoon stared at her. "You would do that? But your people, your mission here—" "I do not care about my mission. I do not care what my people think." Tira's voice was steady and clear. "I love your daughter, Jihoon. I love her as if she were my own. I would raise her with all my heart. I would teach her about her mother, about her father. I would make sure she never forgets where she came from." Tears formed in Jihoon's eyes. He tried to speak but could not find words. Tira squeezed his hands tighter. "I can be a mother to your child, human. If the worst happens, she would never be alone. I promise you this." For a long moment, Jihoon just sat there, overwhelmed. This alien woman, this stranger from another world, was offering to give up everything for his daughter. She was offering to love Yuna forever, not out of duty or obligation, but because her heart had chosen to. Then slowly, Jihoon smiled. It was not a sad smile. It was warm and bright and full of something that looked like hope. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you more than I can ever say. But I am coming back. I am not leaving my daughter. I am not leaving—" He stopped, suddenly uncertain. Tira waited. "I am not leaving you," Jihoon finished quietly. "These past weeks, you have given us so much. You have healed wounds I thought would never heal. You have made Yuna happy. You have made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I do not have to carry everything alone." He took a deep breath. "When I come back from this mission, I want to talk about the future. Not as friends, not as strangers who share tea sometimes. I want to talk about what this is, what we could be." Tira's eyes glowed brighter. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Yuna drew 3 people in her family picture. I mean that when I think about tomorrow, I see you there. Not as a replacement for Yunbi. Never that, but as something new, something different." He paused. "Does that make sense?" "Among my people, we do not form exclusive bonds," Tira said slowly. "We love everyone equally. That is our way. And among my people, we give our hearts completely to just a few people. That is our way. Perhaps there is a third way, something in between, something new." Jihoon nodded. "Perhaps there is." They sat in silence for a while, hands still joined. Outside, the stars wheeled past, ancient and eternal. Inside, 2 hearts from different worlds found themselves beating together. Finally, Tira stood. "You should sleep. Tomorrow is important." Jihoon walked her to the door. Before she left, she turned and placed her hand on his cheek. Her touch was gentle, almost reverent. "Come back to us, Jihoon. Please." "I will," he promised. "I have too much to come back to." She left, and he stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the empty corridor. Then he went to check on Yuna. She was sleeping peacefully, her rabbit tucked under her arm, her face soft and innocent. He kissed her forehead. "I love you, little star," he whispered. "Appa will come home, I promise." Tomorrow he would walk into danger. Tomorrow he might face the same fate as Umbi. But tonight he felt something he had not felt in 2 years. He felt like he had a reason to live. A real, powerful, beautiful reason. Not just duty, not just responsibility, but love. Love for his daughter, and love strange and new and wonderful for a blue-skinned woman who had offered to be a mother to his child. He went to bed with a smile on his face and slept better than he had in years. The extraction team gathered at the shuttle bay at 6 in the morning. There were 5 of them. Jihoon was the lead engineer. With him were 2 miners, a safety specialist, and a young technician named Baek Jisoo, who had just turned 23. Jihoon looked at Jisoo and felt a twist in his stomach. She was so young. She reminded him of Yunbi at that age, full of energy and hope. He hoped he could bring everyone home safely. The asteroid was 3 hours away by shuttle. They traveled in silence, each person lost in their own thoughts. Through the small windows, they watched the stars drift by. Somewhere behind them, Kepler-7 grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light. Yuna had cried that morning when Jihoon said goodbye. She had held onto his legs and begged him not to go. It had taken all his strength to gently peel her away and hand her to Tira. "Take care of her," he had said. "With my life," Tira had replied. Now, speeding through the void, Jihoon held on to those words like a lifeline. The asteroid was massive, a chunk of rock and metal larger than some small moons. They landed in a natural crater and suited up for the descent. The entrance to the xenium deposit was a narrow tunnel that went deep into the asteroid's heart. They walked for hours. The tunnel was dark except for their helmet lights. The walls glowed faintly with minerals, but mostly there was just cold, silent stone. Jihoon checked his radiation meter constantly. The readings were normal, but everyone knew that could change quickly. Finally, they reached the deposit. The xenium glittered in their lights like frozen lightning, beautiful and deadly. Just a few meters away, behind a thin wall of rock, was the radioactive pocket that made this mission so dangerous. "All right," Jihoon said through his helmet radio. "Slow and careful. We have 3 days, no rushing, no shortcuts." The work began. They set up extraction equipment, drilling carefully into the xenium vein. The ore was hard and stubborn. Progress was slow. But by the end of the first day, they had collected enough to fill 2 containers. They made camp in a small chamber near the work site. Sleeping in spacesuits was uncomfortable, but nobody complained. They ate protein bars and drank recycled water and talked about what they would do with their bonus pay. "I am going to buy my parents a house," Jisoo said. "A real house with a garden. They have lived in station apartments their whole lives." "I am taking my wife to Earth," one of the miners said. "She has never seen the ocean." "What about you, Park?" someone asked Jihoon. He thought for a moment. "School for my daughter. And maybe—" he stopped. "Maybe what?" "Nothing. Just dreams." The second day went well. They extracted more xenium, enough to make everyone rich by station standards. The mood was hopeful. Careful, but hopeful. Then came the third day. It happened without warning. The young technician, Jisoo, was drilling near the edge of the vein when the wall collapsed. A roar of breaking rock filled the tunnel. Dust and debris exploded everywhere. Jihoon threw himself at Jisoo, knocking her out of the path of falling stones. They rolled together across the ground as the world shook around them. When the dust settled, Jihoon looked up and felt his heart stop. The tunnel behind them was gone, completely blocked by tons of rock. They were trapped. "Is everyone okay?" Jihoon called out. Voices came back one by one. Jisoo was shaken but unhurt. The safety specialist had a broken arm. One miner was unconscious but breathing. The other miner was missing. They found him under the rubble an hour later. He was alive, barely. His leg was crushed. He needed medical attention that they could not provide. Jihoon checked his communication unit. Static. The collapse had cut them off from the surface. Nobody knew they were trapped. "The rescue team will come," Jisoo said, her voice trembling. "They will dig us out." Jihoon did not answer. He was looking at his radiation meter. The collapse had done something terrible. The readings were climbing, slowly but steadily. The radioactive pocket must have cracked open. They had 48 hours, maybe less. After that, the radiation would be lethal. Back on Kepler-7, Tira knew something was wrong. She felt it the moment the collapse happened. A sudden spike of fear and pain across the vast distance of space. She could not explain how. Empaths were not supposed to work across such distances, but somehow she knew. When the official announcement came, communication lost, rescue teams preparing, Tira was already at the command center, demanding information. "How long do they have?" she asked Director Han. We do not know. The collapse might have breached the radioactive pocket. If it did, 48 hours at most. Then we have no time to waste. The human rescue team was preparing, but they were slow. Protocols had to be followed. Safety checks had to be completed. Equipment had to be tested. Tira watched in frustration as precious hours slipped away. Finally, she could wait no longer. She gathered the Valori delegation and made a proposal. Our scanning technology is more advanced than their, she said. We can map the collapsed tunnels from the surface. We can find the fastest route to the trapped workers. Elder Oren frowned. This is not our concern, Tira. We are researchers, not rescue workers. Innocent people will die. People die everywhere, every day. We cannot save everyone. Tira stepped forward, her eyes blazing. I am not asking to save everyone. I am asking to save 5 specific people. One of them is... She stopped. One of them matters to me. The other Valori exchanged glances. They could all feel her emotions, burning bright and fierce. This was not the calm, distributed affection of their kind. This was something else entirely. You have become like them, Oren said quietly, like the humans. Perhaps I have, and perhaps that is not such a bad thing. In the end, the Valori agreed to help. Their scanning equipment was deployed, and within hours they had mapped a possible route through the collapsed tunnels. It was narrow and dangerous, but it was possible. Then came the hard part. Valori physiology can withstand higher radiation than humans, Tira announced at the rescue briefing. I will lead the team. Director Han shook her head. That is too dangerous. We cannot ask you to risk your life. You are not asking. I am volunteering. The rescue team assembled. 5 humans and Tira. They loaded equipment onto a shuttle and launched toward the asteroid, pushing the engines as hard as they dared. Back on Kepler-7 in the medical bay waiting area, a little girl sat with her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Kim Sujin had tried to take Yuna home, but she had refused to leave. She sat on a bench, her eyes fixed on the door, waiting. A worker asked if she was scared. Yuna shook her head. Tira will bring my Appa back, she said with absolute certainty. She promised. The worker did not know what to say. He just sat down beside her and waited too. Outside, the stars kept their silent watch. Somewhere in the darkness, a shuttle raced toward danger, and a tired father, trapped underground, thought about his daughter and prayed that someone would come. He did not know that help was already on the way. He did not know that an alien woman who loved him was leading the rescue. He only knew that he wanted to live. He wanted to see Yuna grow up. He wanted to find out what the future might hold. He held Jisu's hand in the darkness and told her stories about his daughter to keep them both calm. And he waited, because waiting was all he could do. The rescue shuttle reached the asteroid in record time. Tira was out the door before it fully landed, her scanner already active, her heart beating faster than it ever had before. The other rescuers followed. They were experienced miners and engineers, tough people who had faced danger before. But none of them moved with the urgency that drove Tira. She was a woman possessed, driven by something stronger than duty or professional obligation. Love, pure and terrifying and human. The tunnel entrance was still clear. They entered single file, equipment strapped to their backs. The Valori scanners showed the path ahead. Turn left here. Climb over this pile of rubble. Squeeze through this narrow gap. The way was difficult, but it was possible. The radiation readings climbed as they went deeper. The human rescuers started to slow, their suits beeping warnings. But Tira pushed forward. The Valori body could handle this. She would reach them. She had to. The readings are getting dangerous, one of the rescuers called out. We should wait for the shielding equipment. There is no time, Tira replied without stopping. You stay here. I will go alone. That is crazy. You cannot dig them out by yourself. Then follow me or do not. But I am not stopping. She kept moving. After a moment, the others followed. Humans, she had learned, did not like to be shown up by aliens. Underground, Jehun had lost track of time. The darkness was complete except for their fading helmet lights. The injured miner drifted in and out of consciousness. The safety specialist had made a splint for his own arm and was trying to keep everyone calm. Jisu sat against the wall quietly crying. Jehun moved from person to person, checking on them, encouraging them. His own body ached. He had taken a hard hit during the collapse, probably cracked some ribs. Every breath hurt, but he could not stop. He had to keep everyone alive until help came. If help came. He found himself next to the unconscious miner. The man's breathing was shallow and weak. Without medical treatment, he would not survive much longer. Jihoon sat down beside him. He took off his own thermal blanket and spread it over the injured man, even though this meant he would be cold. It was a small thing, probably useless, but it was something. Jisoo watched him. Why did you do that? You need that blanket too. He needs it more. You could die. Jihoon smiled tiredly. Then at least I will die doing something good. This was what Tira found when she finally broke through the last wall of rubble. She emerged into the trapped chamber, her light cutting through the darkness. What she saw stopped her in her tracks. 5 humans huddled together in the cold. They had pushed the injured ones to the center and surrounded them with their own bodies, sharing warmth. They had rationed their water and oxygen with mathematical precision. They had not given up. They had not panicked. They had taken care of each other. And at the center of it all was Jihoon, barely conscious himself, still moving from person to person, still checking on everyone, still refusing to stop. Tira had studied humans for years. She had read their history and analyzed their behavior. She thought she understood them. But in this moment, she realized she had only seen the surface. This was what made humans special. Not their technology or their curiosity or their stubborn will to survive. It was this impossible, irrational devotion to each other. This willingness to give everything, even their own lives, for people they cared about. Among the Valori, such sacrifice would be considered wasteful, inefficient. Why would one person suffer for another when resources could be distributed equally? But watching Jihoon give his blanket to an unconscious man, watching him ignore his own pain to comfort a crying young woman, watching him hold the group together through sheer force of will, Tira understood something her people never had. Love was not a resource to be managed. It was a fire. And sometimes, to keep others warm, you had to let yourself burn. Jihoon, she called out. Her voice echoed in the chamber. His head snapped up. Through his cracked helmet visor, she could see his face. Exhausted, pale. But when he recognized her, when he understood that she had come for him, his expression transformed. Joy. Pure, desperate, overwhelming joy. You came, he whispered. I promised. The rescue took hours. They had to move carefully, carrying the injured through the narrow tunnels while avoiding unstable sections. The radiation levels kept climbing. By the time they reached the surface, everyone's suits were flashing red warnings. But everyone was alive. All 5 trapped workers made it out. Medical teams were waiting at the shuttle. They rushed the injured to treatment, hooking up tubes and machines with practiced efficiency. Jihoon was among the worst. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, radiation exposure. He needed serious medical care. But before they could put him on a stretcher, he grabbed Tira's hand. Yuna, he said, is she okay? She is fine. She is waiting for you. She never doubted you would come back. He smiled, and then his eyes closed, and he finally let himself rest. Word spread quickly through Kepler-7. The Valori woman had led the rescue. She had pushed through dangerous radiation to reach the trapped workers. She had brought them all home. People who had whispered about Jihoon's strange friendship suddenly fell silent. People who had judged Tira for becoming too attached now looked at her with new respect. Kwon Do-yoon, the stern supervisor, visited Jihoon in the medical bay. The engineer was stable but weak, wrapped in bandages and connected to beeping machines. I owe you an apology, Do-yoon said stiffly. What I said before, about the Valori woman, I was wrong. Jihoon looked at him with tired eyes. You were afraid of what you did not understand. That is human nature. Maybe, but I am learning. We are all learning. Do-yoon paused. She is remarkable, that one. She barely knows us, and she risked her life anyway. She knows us better than you think, Jihoon said softly. She knows what matters. The Valori delegation held their own meeting that night. Elder Oren stood before the group, his expression thoughtful. I have communicated with our homeworld, he announced. I have reported what happened here. The collective is interested. They want to understand. Understand what? Someone asked. Humans. Their way of loving. Tira has shown us something we never considered. Perhaps there is value in focused attachment. Perhaps their way and our way can coexist. He looked at Tira. You will continue your research, but you will also teach us. Help us understand what you have learned. Tira bowed her head. I would be honored. Late that night, she went to the medical bay. Jihoon was sleeping, his breathing slow and steady. The machines beeped softly around him. Tira sat beside his bed and took his hand. She did not speak. She simply sat there, sharing his presence, grateful beyond words that he was alive. Outside, the stars burned on, but for the first time they did not seem cold to her. They seemed like what Yuna had said, like loved ones watching over them, like Yunbi, keeping guard from far away. Tomorrow there would be conversations to have, decisions to make, a future to build. But tonight, it was enough just to be here, together, alive. That was enough. 6 months passed on Kepler-7. Jihoon healed slowly. The radiation damage required multiple treatments, and his broken ribs took weeks to mend properly. But he healed. Day by day, he grew stronger. And day by day, Yuna and Tira were by his side. Yuna had grown taller in those months. She smiled more. She laughed more. She had friends at the child care facility now, other children who wanted to hear stories about the Blue Lady who could feel emotions and sing star songs. She was still quiet sometimes, still thoughtful in ways that children should not have to be. But the shadows in her eyes had faded. She was becoming herself again. Tira had changed too. She walked through the station with a new confidence. Other Valori visited Kepler-7 now, sent by the collective to learn from her. They observed human families, attended birthday parties and holiday celebrations, and slowly began to understand what Tira had discovered. Love did not have to be spread thin to be real. Sometimes focusing your heart on just a few people made it burn brighter than any sun. One evening, a message arrived for Jihoon. He read it twice, then sat down heavily on his bed. Yuna was playing with building blocks on the floor. Tira was making tea in the small kitchen. When she saw his face, she came immediately. What is wrong? She asked. Jihoon held up his datapad. The company has offered me a transfer, inner colonies, safe work, good pay, excellent schools for Yuna. Everything I ever wanted for her. Tira felt her heart grow cold. The inner colonies, millions of kilometers away. A different life, a human life, without her. She forced herself to speak calmly. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. Jihoon looked up at her. I turned it down. What? I said no. I am staying here. Tira stared at him, not understanding. But Yuna's school, her future. You have talked about this for years. This is your dream. No. Jihoon stood and took her hands. That was my old dream. Before you. Before everything changed. He smiled softly. I have a new dream now, he explained. The company had announced a new program, a joint human Valori research initiative, based right here on Kepler-7. They needed experienced engineers who understood both species. They needed people who could bridge the gap between two different worlds. I volunteered, Jihoon said, and they accepted. I will be working with your people, learning from them, helping them learn from us. And Yuna can stay here, where she has friends, where she has... He looked at Tira. Where she has family. Tira's eyes glowed bright with emotion. You would do that? Give up everything you planned? I am not giving up anything. I am choosing something better. He reached up and touched her face gently. I am choosing you, Tira. I am choosing us. That same week, another message arrived. This one was for Tira. The Valori Collective had made a decision. They were establishing a permanent liaison position on Kepler-7. Someone to live among the humans long-term, to study them, to learn from them, to represent Valori interests. They wanted Tira for the job. She accepted immediately. The weeks that followed were busy. Jihoon moved to his new position and found that he loved it. Working with the Valori was challenging but rewarding. They saw the universe so differently, and every conversation taught him something new about his own humanity. Tira threw herself into her work as well. But she also spent every spare moment with Jihoon and Yuna. She learned to cook human food, with mixed results. She learned human games and human jokes and human ways of showing affection. She was not human and would never be human, but she was learning to love like one. 1 month later, they gathered in the station's garden dome. This was a small space with real plants, artificial sunlight, and a ceiling painted to look like Earth's sky. It was the closest thing to nature on the whole station. People came here for weddings, memorials, and important ceremonies. Today it was filled with witnesses. Human engineers and Valori researchers, Director Han and Elder Oran, Kim Sujin and Young Jasu, who had become close friends with the family after the rescue. Even Kwon Do-hyun was there, standing awkwardly in the back, but present nonetheless. There was no official name for what they were doing. It was not a human wedding. It was not a Valori bonding ritual. It was something new, something that had never existed before. Ji-hoon stood at the center of the dome, wearing his best clothes. Beside him stood Tira, beautiful in a flowing dress that shifted colors like her skin. And between them, holding both their hands, stood Yuna. Director Han stepped forward. She had agreed to lead the ceremony, though she had admitted she was making it up as she went. "We are gathered here today," she began, "to witness something extraordinary. Two people from different worlds choosing to build a life together, choosing to become a family." She spoke about love crossing boundaries. She spoke about courage and hope and new beginnings. She spoke about Yunbi, who was not forgotten, whose memory lived on in Yuna's smile and Ji-hoon's strength. Then it was time for promises. Ji-hoon spoke first. "Tira, I promise to love you as you are, not as I might want you to be. I promise to learn your ways and teach you mine. I promise to face the future together, whatever it brings. You saved my life. You saved my daughter's heart. Now I offer you both, for as long as the stars keep burning." Tira's voice trembled slightly as she replied, "Ji-hoon, I promise to be present when you need me and give you space when you do not. I promise to share your burdens and multiply your joys. I promise to love Yuna as my own, not to replace what she has lost, but to add to what remains. My people do not believe in exclusive bonds, but I choose you. I choose this family. I choose this love, fierce and focused and terrifying and wonderful." Then Director Han looked at Yuna. "And what do you promise, little one?" Yuna thought carefully. She was only 5, but she understood the importance of this moment. "I promise to always hold both their hands," she said finally, "and to remember my first Iyama while loving my new Iyama too, and to share my rabbit with Tira sometimes, because sharing is important." Everyone laughed. Even Elder Oren smiled, which was rare for him. The ceremony ended with a simple gesture. No rings. Valori did not wear jewelry. No kiss. They would save that for private. Instead, all three of them placed their hands together, human and Valori, small and large, forming a circle of touch. Family was not blood or species or tradition. Family was choice. Family was showing up. Family was saying every single day, "I am here. I will stay." The gathered witnesses applauded. Music played. Human songs and Valori harmonies mixed together into something beautiful and strange. People ate and drank and celebrated the union of two worlds. Later that night, after the party ended and the guests went home, Ji-hoon and Tira tucked Yuna into bed together. They sat on either side of her, watching her eyes grow heavy. "Tell me a story," Yuna murmured, "about the stars." Tira began to sing softly, a Valori lullaby about children born from starlight. Ji-hoon added his voice, humming along even though he did not know the words. Yuna smiled and closed her eyes. "I love you both," she whispered. "We love you too, little star," Ji-hoon replied. "More than all the stars in the sky," Tira added. They stayed until she was deeply asleep. Then they walked to the observation deck, hand in hand, and looked out at the universe together. The galaxy had always seemed vast and empty to Ji-hoon, cold and indifferent. But now, standing beside Tira, he saw it differently. The stars were not just burning balls of gas millions of kilometers away. They were possibilities, adventures waiting to happen, a future full of wonder. "Are you scared?" Tira asked. "Of what comes next?" Ji-hoon considered the question. A year ago, the answer would have been yes. He had been scared of everything. Scared of failing Yuna. Scared of living without Yunbi. Scared of being alone. But now, with Tira beside him and his daughter sleeping peacefully behind them, he felt something different. No, he said, not anymore. He pulled her close and they stood together, watching the stars. Two people from different worlds, building something new. Proof that love could cross any distance, bridge any gap, create any miracle. The universe was vast and strange and full of wonders. But the greatest wonder of all was simple. It was family. It was home. It was the choice to love, made fresh every single day. And that, Jihoon realized, was something worth living for. Something worth fighting for. Something worth crossing the stars for. He smiled into the darkness, and for the first time in years, he felt completely at peace. Above them, the stars burned on, watching, waiting, and among them, somewhere, a woman named Yunbi looked down at her husband and daughter and the blue-skinned stranger who had become part of their family, and she smiled too.